Awesome. And you told me something off air just now before we started recording that I did not know. And it's related to our favorite our favorite punching bag on the show that we like to
White
entertain our
lightning.
listeners with. White lightning. So tell the people. So apparently something that I did not know going into this discussion, Tim Horner actually was the one who helped you get your role in Smoky Mountain Wrestling as the ring announcer. So do you want to
Right.
talk about that? And then I got some Tim Horner questions for you.
Sure. As I said before, Tim, I went to church with Tim. I used to sing all the time at church, and I used to have a radio show, which Tim listened to. And I used to talk to Tim about wrestling, and he knew I was really interested in wrestling. And so he called and asked me if I'd work the TV taping because Brian Matthews, who was their very first ring announcer, couldn't work the Morristown show. And they liked me enough where I'll never forget. I went to several shows with Tim. I went to the Bluegrass Brawl, which is probably one of the best Smoky Mountain Wrestling shows I've ever been to. I mean, you can't beat that main event, and plus the chain match and everything. It was awesome.
That
Then I
was
also
a
went
hell
to-
of a show.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Then I went to the Last Tango in Tennessee with Tim. I just go to different house shows with Tim too, and it was really cool because people saw me on TV. They knew who I was. But the very first time I was actually got to say my name on TV was the Poolside Press Conference. But what was really cool is I was really good friends with Tim, but I was also really good friends. I hit it off with Jim Cornette. The reason why I became the ring announcer most of the time is because Jim liked the idea that I had a recording studio in my basement. So Jim and his wife and Tim and his wife came over to my house, and we watched Slamboree 93 at my house, and Jim saw it was really cool watching a pay-per-view of Jim Cornette, but saw my setup at my house and really liked it and said he was going to start using me. And the next month, he started letting me do some of the house shows, and we also had me do the TV tapings too, which the Cumberland TV tapings was my first one after the Morristown TV tapings. Then I worked like the next 4 or 5 TV tapings. Then I was off for 2 or 3. Then I'd work because I had a normal job too. And then I started working all the TV tapings after that. But Tim Horner I've grown up and I've known Tim all my life. So, and actually Tim still does high school football games for Morristown East. He does the radio broadcast for them, but I've known Tim all my life.
I'll be darned. So that's funny. You're talking about. I want to say something. So back then, Tim and Jim had no problem watching a pay-per-view together.
No, I mean, they were
No, I'm
just
messing with you. Based on everything we know now, we've heard all the back
really
and
cool
forth.
because I had plenty of Sprite because Jim loved to drink Sprite,
Yeah.
and so I had a satellite dish. And even after Smoky Mountain Wrestling, when Jim moved up to Connecticut to work with WWF, I used to record all the pay-per-views and send them to him. And I actually moved all Jim's stuff from his house in Morristown back to his place in Louisville, Kentucky. He rented out a U-Haul. Me and one of my friends, he paid us to load all the stuff up and move all his stuff up to his Castle Cornet in Louisville.
I'll be darned. So, all right, Tommy, you're friends with Tim. I was going to ask you this later on in the show after we talked about Tammy and Brian, but I got to ask now. So you're friends with Tim. Are you still friends with him to this day?
Yes.
Okay. So here's a question. Tommy, we've been brutal to Tim in regards to his promos in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Is Tim Horner aware of the show? And if so, how bad does he want to stretch me, Doc, and Harper?
I think he knows of the show. I don't think he listens to it often. So I don't think he wants to actually stretch you or nothing, but I think he knows what his limitations were when it comes to that. And I think he knows that's what held him back some, but he did. And I can be honest with you. Tim's was one of my best friends. Tim had delusions of grandeur where he thought he should be the top person in the territory. And Jim's feeling about Tim was if you're having a movie, Tim would be the best friend. and he would always be the complimentary talent, not on top talent. And I think that's why they didn't see eye to eye. And what's really cool is I do listen to your podcast, and you don't get to see much more of Tim after about 6 more months, although he does become Kendo the Samurai next year as you're watching or you're going through the podcast. But Tim's not on the show very much, so you need to get he needs to win all the Tim Horner awards that he can, because pretty soon the Dirty White Girl's going to win it every week.
In fairness, I'll repeat what I always say. I think Tim is an excellent in-ring performer. He's a very, very talented wrestler. His limitations were the promos, for obvious reasons. I think there's enough proof out there that can justify when we say that. The other thing, too, you mentioned what Jim Cornette said about him being the supporting actor. Yeah, I mean, Jim actually told me and Doc that when he was on the show months ago. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's a truth, and we'll go from there. But yeah, man, definitely. My thing always, and I'll just say this, and I know we're recording, and everybody will hear this. I would never want someone to think while we're reviewing a show it's like a personal thing, because it's really not. It's just, we're watching a wrestling show. We got to talk about something, as we always say. If we don't like something, we got to say we don't like it. We're not going to kiss the ass of everyone that we review. But anyway, so that's cool. So, all right, well, we got the Tim Horner stuff out the way. So, Tommy, when I'm ready to have Tim Horner on the show and he's not going to stretch me when I interview him, I'll definitely contact you and say, hey, can you get in touch with Tim for me?
Sure.